The Holy Roman Empire has made pivotal and defining contributions to Western civilization, but its many reincarnations have also come with painful and catastrophic consequences. European leaders aim to unite the fractured continent of Europe by reviving the legacy of this extraordinary church-state combine. One of the great lessons of this empire is that it always comes back. There is always another resurrection. The Holy Roman Empire is not just a relic of history. It is about to play a central role in world events. On today's program, we'll examine the seventh and final resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire. The Trumpet Daily.
70 years ago, Herbert Armstrong predicted that the world would soon be stunned to see a German-led European Union emerge as a world power, as a union of 10 nations coming right out of Europe. It's prophesied in your Bible. He even said that half of it would come from Western Europe and half of it from Eastern Europe. He said that back in the 1940s and 50s. How did he know this? How did he know? He said, soon the United States of Europe will emerge with Germany at its head. How did he know? How did he know this? He said that this prophesied resurrection of the Roman Empire would come together suddenly, and that's what we're seeing right now in Europe. It's happening right before our eyes. Let's begin today's program by just playing you a clip from Herbert Armstrong. This takes us back to the 1960s.
I wonder if you realize that about 1/3 of the Bible is prophecy. 90% of that, approximately, is devoted to the pulsating present and the time immediately ahead of us, the next few years. Yet that is the neglected third of the Bible. That's the third you seldom ever hear a sermon about. You seldom ever hear it preached, and if you do, it'd barely be to get a word out of it or something, and then the preacher to go on and preach something of his own ideas about something that has nothing to do with what's actually going to happen in the world. And yet here in the Bible, about 1/3 of it devoted to prophecy, telling you what is going to happen.
That's Herbert Armstrong talking on his old radio program about Bible prophecy. 1/3 of your Bible is prophecy, and most of it, 90% of it, he said, is for the latter days. It's for our day. And yet, as I've noted before on this program, that's the 1/3 of your Bible that most people ignore, even in the world of Christianity, traditional Christianity. They ignore this exciting, pulsating 1/3 that actually tells us what's going to happen in the latter days. Let's look at some of these prophecies that Mr. Armstrong based his forecast on. His forecast that is just spot on. When you look at what he said in the 1950s, the 1960s, and then you read the headlines today. Coming up in the second segment, we'll look at some of those headlines. But first, the prophecy. This is Revelation 17, starting in verse 7. It says, "And the angel said unto me, Wherefore did you marvel? I will tell you the mystery of the woman and the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns." We're picking it up in the middle of the chapter here. You can go back on your own time and read the first few verses. They're discussed in this booklet we're going to be offering to you today. The Holy Roman Empire in prophecy. That's what this is talking about in Revelation 17. There's this great image of a beast, and a woman is straddling the beast. And John is given this message, and God says, why do you marvel? Here's what it is. Here's the meaning. Here's the interpretation. The Bible interprets itself. Verse 8, it continues. It says, "And the beast that you saw was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit, and go into perdition, and they that dwell on the earth shall wonder," it says, "whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was, and is not, and yet is." The people of this world will wonder, it says, when they see this beast emerge, when they see this final resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire. It's going to happen suddenly, as Mr. Armstrong said so many times. Here's another example of that, a clip, again, from his old radio program back in the 1960s.
But today it becomes a very solemn warning. And now the time is very imminent. The new United States of Europe is on the verge of going together. Now, it has gone together a number of times. Already, well, 5 times directly and a 6th time that the world hardly noticed. And we're waiting now for the 7th resurrection of the Roman Empire. And the whole world is going to be astounded.
What Mr. Armstrong was saying there in that clip, it's not only coming out of your Bible prophecy, but it's the record of history. We've seen this resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire in the past. It's happened before, and when it happens again in this end time, the world will be shocked, astounded. Let's look at verse 10, staying here in Revelation 17. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come, and when he comes, he must continue a short space. And so Mr. Armstrong was on the scene when 5 were fallen and another was right there. He was there during that 6th resurrection, going back to the 1930s and 40s. And then there's another one to come, even after Mr. Armstrong's ministry. And that's what we're witnessing here today. We're seeing it. And when it comes, as the verse says, it's going to continue for a short space. It'll continue for a short time. Let me take you to a quote. This is by Mr. Armstrong. This is something he wrote back in 1981. He said, "But suddenly, unexpectedly, as biblical prophecy reveals, the whole world will be startled and shocked into wonder." That's based on this verse. The whole world will wonder, or actually verse 8, which we read a moment ago. It says, "To learn that a new 3rd super world power has suddenly burst forth onto the world scene, a resurrection of the medieval Holy Roman Empire by a union of 10 nations in Europe, very possibly 5 in Western Europe and 5 broken loose from the communist orbit in Eastern Europe." Now notice the date, once again, on that letter. It's from 1981. 1981, the Soviet Union, coming out of the 1970s, had so many advances. They were spreading communism all over the world. They had their control over Eastern Europe. And Mr. Armstrong was there saying there's going to be nations in Western Europe that break free from that. And that has happened. That has happened. You've seen it. You've witnessed it. And now we see the European Union coming together. And there have been struggles. There have been squabbling nations in that union for sure. We'll look more at that in the second segment. But still, look at what has already happened. And now you see that union acting with an ever greater sense of urgency. Because of the Brexit vote back in June, Britain is on the way out. And you have those strong voices in the heart of Europe, Germany in particular, that are calling for a closer, stronger union, a core Europe, to come together. Verse 12. It says, "And the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast." That's referring to the prophesied United States of Europe, the 7th and final resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire. 10 kings, or 10 heads of state, 10 groups that are going to be coming together. As Mr. Armstrong said in that letter, half of them from the west, half of them from the east. And we've seen so much of this happen already. Verse 13 says, "These have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast." They have one mind. Really, you're going to see it become more and more undemocratic. That's what's happening. And many are already awakening to that fact. But they come together with one mind and they give their power to this beast, this European beast. And notice what it leads right into. It says in verse 14, "These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. For he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And they that are with him are called and chosen and faithful. They're going to make war with the Lamb. That's referring to Jesus Christ. The returning Jesus Christ as King of kings and Lord of lords, also talked about at length in this prophecy, in the book of Revelation. They're going to fight against the returning Jesus Christ and his saints. Jesus Christ will not be welcome to this earth. The nations of this earth are actually going to assemble together to fight against him. But the glorious good news is that these prophecies we're seeing unfold before our eyes, coming out of the third of your Bible, that's prophecy. It leads right into the return of Jesus Christ and the establishment of God's kingdom on this earth. For more about those prophecies to unfold immediately before the return of Jesus Christ to this earth, make sure that you request the Holy Roman Empire in prophecy. We'll be right back.
In a rapidly changing world, most observers say that Europe, divided and squabbling, is destined to remain a second-rate power. The Holy Roman Empire in prophecy forecasts a different future. European leaders who seek to forge the fractured continent into a unified superpower are working from an extraordinary historical model, the Holy Roman Empire. Since the days of Justinian in the 6th century, this powerful church-state combine has repeatedly risen to dominate the continent. Modern advances of European unification applaud the cultural, economic, and political accomplishments of this empire. But an honest look at history reveals a sinister side of its legacy, and aspects of the way the continent is coming together today are beginning to recall that dark past. The fact that Europe's architects want to resurrect the Holy Roman Empire makes this history a prophecy of Europe's future. If you want to grasp the true nature of the political religious project unfolding in Europe, and even to know Europe's future and how it will shape the world and impact every nation on earth, you need to read The Holy Roman Empire in Prophecy. Request your free copy today.
Gradually, and now faster and faster, a new power is being developed from underneath the surface, a new world power which the public now least suspects, which the world does not yet see, doesn't realize, doesn't dream is coming, but it is developing just as prophesied in Europe, a resurrected Roman Empire that will combine some 350 millions of population, a power so mighty that our Western peoples will stand aghast when it flashes suddenly into full being. Yes, your Bible says that the world will be startled.
That was another clip from Herbert Armstrong's old radio program talking about the European Union. It came on the scene gradually back in the 50s, and he was right on top of it, following every little detail. But then, as he said there in that clip, I mean, once it comes to the surface, it's going to happen very fast, suddenly, and people will be shocked. Well, now look at what's happening in Europe. Let's look at some of the headlines. This one here comes from Newsweek, just earlier in September 7th, 2016. Should the European Union have its own army, it asks? And notice this. While the American news media have been preoccupied with Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, a more important development has taken place in Europe that has received scant attention. It hasn't gotten any attention for the most part. And I'll go to another article in just a second that says basically the same thing. I mean, look at the kinds of stories that get all kinds of attention today. And meanwhile, you have discussion of a European army coming together. It's received scant attention, as it says there. The prime ministers of both Hungary and the Czech Republic have urged the European Union to build its own army. That is a very significant shift in attitude. Until now, the European countries had been content to channel security matters through NATO and to focus the EU's attention on economic issues. See, until now, that's what the focus was on. They looked to NATO for their defense, and the focus was more on economic issues. And that's exactly the way Mr. Armstrong said that it would come about. First, it started as an economic union, and then a political union, and then a military union. And we're seeing all of that come into play. It's all coming together, just exactly the way he said it would. Look at another story. This is ABC News. Collective defense is suddenly a hot topic at EU summit. That's referring to the recent EU summit in September. And note the word suddenly in the title. Suddenly, that's the topic of conversation in Europe. Britain's on the way out. And Britain, by the way, never did want a European army. And it still doesn't want it. Why? It's very strong against it. Well, just going back to Mr. Armstrong and his prophecies, you should also know that as early as the 1950s, he was talking about Britain being on the outside of this European Union, that Britain would be no part of it. And now that's happened. You talk about all of these fulfilled prophecies. It's happening. It's happening. And now suddenly the hot topic is this collective defense in Europe. It says talk of joint efforts to defend Europe is on the lips of EU leaders after decades of leaving collective security mostly to the United States and NATO. But see, now even the United States is pulling away. President Barack Obama is urging Europe to be more assertive. He's urging Germany to take the lead. And many of the leaders in Europe are saying the same. The French president recently said there's no continent, there's no union, if there's no defense of what we are when it comes to values and interests. We've got to have the army. The German chancellor is right on board with that as well. They're being urged to do so from the United States. There's not too many voices that are against it. Britain maybe is one of the only ones. There was another story recently, too, about the chief foreign policy diplomat in Europe calling for a two-speed Europe. She said, with Britain now out of the way, we can really accelerate the formation of this united military front. And let's do it in two speeds. Let's get the ones that are really anxious to do this. Let's get those nations out front together in sort of a core Europe. You can see these 10 groups, these 10 nations, these 10 kings coming together, just as your Bible prophesies. In Revelation 17, we read that in the first segment, but also Daniel 2. We'll go there in just a second. But this chief diplomat in Europe, this foreign policy chief, she said that there was a time when there was a lot of resistance to this idea of a common military union, but now she says she sees a lot of readiness. She sees nations that are ready. Another article, this comes from a website, warontherocks.com. You can see the title there, Germany embraces realpolitik once more. See, now projecting its influence with power, with military might. That's what it's embracing once more. History's repeating itself. The article says the recently released German defense white paper, or Weißbuch, represents a significant step forward in Germany's ongoing transformation to a, quote, normal power, although it has received limited attention in the Anglophone media. Here again, it's just not covered. There's too many other stories that the Western press is excited about. Trivial things. It says it's not covered in the Anglophone media. The Weißbuch marks a fundamental shift in several respects. That's what we're seeing. A fundamental shift. And that's brought out in the recent paper, the German white paper. This article goes on and says, in many respects, the 2016 Weißbuch is similarly a product of its time, yet the times have changed dramatically in the last decade. And with them, so too has Germany's perception of its role in the world. The seeds of these changes were planted 2 years ago when Germany's president, foreign minister, and defense minister each argued that it was time for their country to take on greater responsibility in international security. Those important initial rhetorical steps clearly found a more detailed articulation in the 2016 Weißbuch, which repeatedly emphasizes the themes of responsibility and leadership. See, this is just in the last few years. We've got to take the lead. We've got to go on the offensive. That's what's brought out in the next bit here. It says, what is perhaps most significant is the declaration that Germany will be willing to not simply participate in, but also to initiate such coalitions. This is a major departure from the past, in which Germany consistently sought to exercise hard power solely through established multilateral institutions. Things are changing, and they're changing fast. Now, let's go over to the book of Daniel. Daniel chapter 2. It is, as you turn over there, read these verses along with me, please. Get your Bible and see for yourself what God has to say. And as you turn over there, let's just consider, is this a good idea? A European army with Germany leading the way? It wasn't that long ago. It's just 70 years ago when, coming out of the Yalta Conference, you had Winston Churchill and Franklin Roosevelt saying that it's our purpose to destroy German militarism forever. We have to, for the safety of the world. That's what the leaders in Britain and the United States were saying just 7 decades ago, just 2 generations ago. And so many people today have forgotten all of that history. They're not even interested, as you saw from these pieces I've quoted. It's not even getting press attention. It's not even getting much coverage. I wouldn't be surprised if you haven't even heard much about it. Well, we have. We talk about it often on our radio program, by the way, the Trumpet Daily Radio Show. If you've not tuned in, you can get the live stream of that program every day right here in the UK at 1 p.m. every weekday afternoon. If you go to thetrumpet.com, you can see the link there that gets you right through to that live stream. And if you listen regularly to that program, you'll know what's happening. Your eyes will be opened to what's happening in your world, right here in your neck of the woods, right here in Europe. We need to watch and pray always, as Jesus said that we should do. Let's look at Daniel 2 here. In verse 40, it says, "And the fourth kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaks in pieces and subdues all things, and as iron that breaks all these shall it break in pieces and bruise." Again, we're picking it up in the middle of the vision. But this great image of Daniel 2, it represents 4 world-ruling kingdoms. And this one here is the 4th one, the Roman Empire. It came to power in 30 BC or so and continued on for about 500 years or so. And then it was crushed. But what happened after that? Well, your Bible and also your history books tell us that there have been several resurrections of that Roman Empire, that ancient system. That's what your Bible says. That's what your Bible prophesied. And that's what we've seen play out now 6 times. And the 7th time is happening right in front of our eyes. That's the truth. Verse 41 says, "And whereas you saw the feet and the toes, part of potter's clay and part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, but there shall be in it the strength of the iron. For as much as you saw the iron mixed with miry clay," and verse 42, "and as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken." It's an unsteady mixture in many ways. There's all these squabbling factions. There's all these different desires and beliefs, different languages even. And yet, when they come together for a short time, as Revelation 17 says, and when they do, there's real strength, iron-like strength. Mr. Armstrong wrote in Are We in the Last Days? We're now looking for the 10th and last resurrection of the Roman Empire. There were 3 before the Holy Roman Empire came on the scene. That's where he gets that 10th there. It says the 7th head of this beast of the 17th chapter of Revelation, which is also pictured by the 10 toes of Nebuchadnezzar's image of Daniel 2. It says, "Since these toes were on the 2 feet that represented Eastern and Western Europe, there is a strong likelihood that this final resurrection of the Holy Roman Empire will include iron curtain nations of Eastern Europe as well as nations in Western Europe." Now that, as I brought out before, has already happened. It's already happened. And now, just like with Revelation 17, look here and see what this leads right into. Verse 44, it says, "And in the days of these kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. A commentary says that while these kings are reigning, that's when God establishes his kingdom on this earth. For much more on these prophecies, Daniel 2, Revelation 17, and many others, make sure you get the information after the program here to request your free copy of the Holy Roman Empire in Prophecy. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.